Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's hearing. We're still on firefighter evidence, so in a moment we're going to call first quite a long list of firefighter witnesses for today. Is that right, Mr. Kinnear?
Yes, sir. Good morning. The first of the 7 witnesses we have today is crew manager Ben Gallagher.
Good. Thank you.
I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gallagher. Take a seat and make yourself comfortable. Yes, Mr. Kinnear.
Good morning. First of all, can you confirm your name for the record?
Ben Gallagher.
Good morning, Mr. Gallagher. Thank you very much for coming along to give evidence today. First of all, you should have in front of you a blue folder, and if you open it up to the first tab in that folder, there will be your statement dated the 11th of January of this year. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And if you turn to the next tab in that folder, there should be your contemporaneous note.
Yes, that's correct.
And if you turn over a final tab, there should be a pro forma Appendix A following on from your contemporaneous notes.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you. And have you read those documents recently?
Yes.
And do you confirm their contents are true?
Yes.
And do you contend for those documents to stand as your evidence to the inquiry?
Yes, I do.
Now, Mr. Gallagher, I'm not going to be going through every line in your witness statement, just drawing out particular topics, and in particular your experiences on the 3 times you entered the tower on the night. If at any time I ask a question that's unclear, say so, and I'll try and put it properly and clearly. But also, if at any time you want a break, please say so, it's not a problem.
Okay.
Now, if we could start with some basic information. First of all, at the time of the fire, it's right that you were a crew manager stationed at Paddington Fire Station.
Yes, that's correct.
And at the time of the fire, you had 11 years' experience as a firefighter. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And on the night, you rode on the pump ladder appliance whose call sign was Alpha 212.
Yes.
Now, as to timings, the LFB has given us some records which indicate that Alpha 212 was mobilised at 01:15, mobile at 01:17, and arrived at the scene 01:26. Do those timings sound about right to you?
Yes.
And finally, in respect of timings, the LFB has also given us records of your SDBA wear, which indicate that the SDBA was disconnected from the appliance at 01:25, and that your initial tally out at the Bridgehead was 01:42. Again, does that sound about right?
Yes, I can't remember, to be honest.
Okay. The first matter I'd like to talk to you about is your first entry into the tower. And if I could ask you to turn to your witness statement. Mr. Gallagher, it's probably easier. You'll see next to you a screen, and Paul, the document manager, will flash up your statement, and it's probably easier to read on there and expand the relevant extract I'd like you to look at. Could I ask you to look at the last paragraph and the last line on that page? And you say this: I went in the front lobby of the building where a watch manager was positioned. I do not know his name. I asked him what he needed. He said, just hold fire for a minute. Now, are you able to identify the watch manager now?
No, I'm not.
Was it clear to you at the time why he asked you to hold back for a minute?
That normally happens because they're information gathering, so it can be detailed correctly.
Can you remember whether there were any other crews going up at the time whilst you were being asked to hold fire for a minute?
No, he was the only person I saw.
Now, if I could ask you to turn over the page to page 5 of your statement. You say, I asked him if the lifts had been secured. He told me they hadn't, so I said, no worries, I will get that. Did the watch manager indicate that he did not know whether the lifts had been secured yet?
I think, to be honest, he just said something along the lines of, yeah, go and try and secure the lift. Yeah, after I'd said it, he agreed. Okay. So I don't know if he was there first of all.
So he didn't give you any explanation as to why they might not have been secured already?
No, nothing else.
Okay. Now, you went to the lift, and you say that you were pretty sure that you used your drop key to secure the lifts. Are you sure that you used your drop key and that there wasn't a key already in place?
No, I used my drop key, but I also pressed the button as well.
When you operated the drop key, did you feel or hear a click?
No, I can't remember, but that's not unusual.
Were you satisfied that the key was turned to the fire control on position?
No, all I know is that the lift came down, all the doors opened, so whether it went into fire lift mode or not, I can't tell you.
And you can't remember whether the fire control light came on or not?
No.
Okay. Now, in the third paragraph on page 5, you describe what you've intimated there, the fact that you opened, the lift opened, and, quotes, a great big plume of black smoke came straight into me. First of all, can you remember which lift opened and from which lift the plume of smoke came out?
I believe it was the right-hand side one.
Given the plume of smoke came out, what did you think at the time that this indicated about the likely smoke conditions within the tower?
To be honest, I just immediately thought it was very strange that the lift was full of smoke. At the time, it seemed as though the smoke came down as the door was opened. So I actually thought that it was maybe in the lift shaft.
And I suppose the next question is, have you encountered that phenomenon before? Is it unusual to have such a great big plume of black smoke emerge from the lift when you open it?
Never to the amount that came out, no.
At the time, did you think what this may have, what the effect might be on evacuation of the building?
No, I didn't.
And did you take any steps to stop the lifts being used?
No, I just remember I was with the watch manager and I just remember saying, well, we won't be using the lifts then. And then we went back out into the lobby and then things just moved quite quickly from there. So there wasn't, no, the thought didn't really come
Did you
into
see
my
the
mind.
watch manager do anything to stop the lifts being used when you were still within his vicinity?
No, I didn't, no.
Okay. Now, you then went outside the tower, if that's right. And if I could ask you to turn to page 6 of your witness statement, in the top paragraph there, you describe going outside of the tower to check the back of the building, and that you saw people shouting out from different floors, but it was difficult to make out from which floor. Now, around that time, do you recall Mr. Tillotson coming to the view that there needed to be an early evacuation?
No, there wasn't. I mean, it was such sort of pandemonium from up in the windows that it wasn't a conversation that we were having. We were trying to keep people calm from down there and just explain that we were coming to get them.
Do you remember having any conversation, or indeed just overhearing Mr. Tillotson talk to anyone else about the need for evacuation at this stage in the evening?
Oh, I didn't know.
Now, you say it, again, page 6 of your witness statement in line 6 of that top paragraph, that in response to the occupants' shouts, you, a firefighter from your machine and another from Hammersmith, quote, shouted to them to stay where they were and asked what flat they were in. What information did you do with the information that was shouted down to you from the occupants within the tower?
To be honest, I think it was probably a little bit fruitless shouting that because we just couldn't hear them or understand them, or I couldn't anyway.
Could you tell whether the other firefighter from your appliance or whether the firefighter from Hammersmith were able to make out what was being shouted to you?
I don't know.
Okay. Now, if I can turn to the bridgehead. After you'd inspected the back and front of the tower, is it right that you went to the bridgehead?
Yes, that's correct.
And at that point, was the bridgehead giving out orders to search and rescue? Can you remember?
No, we went to the Bridgehead. I think it was 5 of us who went to the Bridgehead. So where it was very small. So no, I wasn't right at the front. So I don't know what the discussion really was. No.
Was Mr. Tillotson one of the 5 that went up to the Bridgehead at that time?
Yes, he was.
How far in front of you was he, if he was in front of you?
Maybe 2 metres.
Could you hear what he was saying to those in charge of the Bridgehead?
I just heard him explain that there's people hanging out the back of the tower, shouting for help, and we needed to go up and get them.
And he was emphasising search and rescue. Is that a fair way to describe
Yes,
it?
yes.
And so I think in his statement, Mr. Tillotson says he recalls a conversation with Watch Manager O'Keefe in which he said, quotes, "We need to get hold of this now. We need to get in there and start rescuing people." Does that accord with your memory?
Sorry, who said that?
Mr. Tillotson talking to Mr. O'Keefe at the Bridgehead.
It would have been something along those lines, yes, yeah.
Mr. Wolfenden, or James Wolfenden, I should say, I think you call him Wolfie,
Yeah.
suggests that it was crew manager Tillotson who decided to undertake the search and rescue, to which Mr. O'Keefe said, "Fine, you crack on." Does that accord with your memory?
Yes, that's correct.
Given what you'd seen outside, did you think it was necessary to take any secondary sets of BA equipment with you?
No, we wouldn't take second sets unless we were going to find other firefighters, or if there was a firefighter emergency, or we had missing firefighters. We wouldn't take a spare set, no.
Because I think I don't know whether you watched last week's evidence, but one of the questions was, is it ever automatic that you take up secondary BA sets? And from what you're saying, the only time it would be automatic is in the event of a missing firefighter. Is that right?
Yeah, or if we were detailed as an emergency crew, so that would be a crew standing by in case something happened, so you would have a spare set with you.
Did you receive any specific instructions in relation to specific flats that, in relation to any FSG calls?
No.
Were you given any details regarding conditions in the stairwell?
No.
Were you given a plan or a layout of the... No. Put bluntly, is it fair to say it was just a question of you cracking on?
Yeah, to be honest, yes.
It's always difficult, particularly in the context of a hearing room, to fully convey the atmosphere within the tower. Are you able to describe for us your memory of the conditions at the Bridgehead, state of organisation, whether it was calm or not?
It seemed relatively calm, to be honest, at the time. There was Watch Manager O'Keefe was there and another firefighter who I don't know running the board. It was just very tight and cramped, so just things moved very, very quickly from when we got there, and Crew Manager Tillotson put forward what he was suggesting. Everything just moved quite quickly, but it was relatively calm, to be honest.
I'd now like to turn to the time where you went under air and into the tower. Now, you tallied out at 0142. Did you see any firefighters or residents coming down the stairwell before you reached the 6th floor?
No.
As you went up the tower, between the Bridgehead and the 6th floor, were you entering on each lobby, on each floor, and banging on each flat door? Can you remember what you did?
We went up to where I believe it was the 4th, where the fire floor was, and then we went because the residents at the back looked as though they were higher than the 4th floor, so we then tried to go systematically from there and work our way up, banging on all the doors, yeah.
And so when you say systematically, you'd go on from the 4th floor up, just to be clear.
So we go to the 5th. They weren't very big lobbies at all,
yeah.
So we'd knock on every single door, loudly, saying who we were. And if people came out, if they were able-bodied or young, we were directing them down the stairs, or we led a few people down the stairs.
What were smoke conditions like on the 4th and 5th floors during that process?
At the time, I don't know about the 4th. I don't believe we entered the 4th. It was quite. It was difficult to tell what floors you were on because there wasn't any signage.
Can you remember at
But-
that sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, but there wasn't smoke logging at this stage.
Can you remember at this stage in the evening, was the lighting working in the stairwell?
Yeah, I believe it was, yes.
Do you remember what, if any, hoses and equipment were lying in the stairwell as you went up to the 6th floor?
No.
You reached the 6th floor and banged on the doors, getting people out. Again, did the process you follow, was it the same that you followed on the 5th floor, systematically going around each of the flats on the 6th floor?
Yeah, I mean, occasionally we got stopped because people were already out of their flats and we'd direct them down, but yeah, that was pretty much it.
When you were banging on the flat entrance doors, can you remember what you were saying?
London Fire Brigade, you need to get out.
Can you remember precisely how many people evacuated from flats on the 6th floor?
No.
Do you remember Mr. Tillotson saying words to the effect, "You have to get out now. If you don't, you won't get out"?
No, I don't. Yeah, we were in a crew of 5, so we were spread out a little bit and doing different doors at different times. So,
do you agree that that was advice that was sensible at the time?
To be honest, I hadn't seen when we arrived. It looked like it was 2 flats alight from the outside, so I had absolutely no understanding of what the conditions were like. To be honest, in the whole block, until we exited.
You say at page 7 of your witness statement, we don't need to go to it unless you want to, that there was, quotes, a nice green handrail, close quotes. Did this help you to lead people down the tower?
Yeah, definitely. You could just tell them to follow the handrail, the green handrail.
You mentioned in your witness statement on page 7 that firefighters started to come down. Were they with residents or were the firefighters on their own?
It was a mixture. Some would just go, obviously, because they can move a lot quicker, and they'd go straight down. And others there because there were some elderly people and people who weren't necessarily able-bodied. You'd have to help them down, yeah.
And can you remember what condition the residents were in, those who were evacuating at that stage?
I think just very confused and because of the timings, very tired, and yeah, were a bit bewildered with what was happening, yeah.
And can you remember whether any of the residents who were evacuating were wearing secondary BA sets or whether they had masks on their face linked to any of them? You don't remember? Or...
No, none of them were, no.
Okay. Could I now turn to conditions as you went further up the tower from the 6th to the 9th floor? First of all, could you describe for us the smoke conditions and the visibility you encountered between the 6th and the 9th floors?
It was all pretty clear, to be honest, until we got to the 9th floor where we found the 2, the lady and her daughter. And then I remember standing in the lobby door to the stairwell, and I looked. I was sort of fitting in and out, and I looked out, and it seemed to get some white smoke, quite hazy. And I remember saying, "There's smoke coming up there. There's smoke coming up the stairs." And then I looked again, and then it was pretty much pitch black coming up the stairs.
So the white had turned to black?
Yes.
And quite quickly, from the sounds of it.
Yeah, it was literally a case of, came in, I said what I said, I went and looked again, and the conditions were like that straight away.
And had it become denser? You mentioned the white smoke was hazy. Was the black smoke denser?
In terms of visibility, yes.
Okay. Now, in your statement, I'll give the reference over on page 7 and 3 lines up from the end of the main paragraph on that page. You refer to the stair procedure. Can you describe for us what the stair procedure is?
Stair procedure is a procedure you'd use if you were to make sure that the stairs were safe and they weren't going to collapse, and you'd basically come down on your front and you'd sweep with your feet. Facing upwards, and you'd sweep with your feet and you'd be banging with your hands just to ensure that what you were walking on was solid.
Okay.
And moving debris if there was any debris on the stairs.
Now, I'd now like to talk to you about the 9th floor and the rescue made there of the mother and child. First of all, you've helped us with conditions on the stairwell. You reached the 9th floor, and did you go into the lobby of the 9th floor?
Yes.
And can you describe the smoke conditions as you found them then?
Well, that was when the conditions got worse than the stairs. The lobby, I think the lights of the lobby weren't working, and to my recollection, there didn't seem to be any smoke damage or any smoke in the lobby at that time.
Who alerted you to the presence of the mother and child? Can you remember now?
No. It was from my crew, but I don't know who particulars now.
But you hadn't opened the relevant flat door?
No.
Could I ask you to turn to page 8 of your witness statement, and it's the second main paragraph on that page, where you say this: I went with another firefighter, who I can't remember, to find out where the dry riser was. Because 99 out of 100 times they are on every single floor, and we had a look in the hallway, which was pitch black just from the darkness, not through smoke. We found it in the back corner, and I immediately knew this would be a problem, because every door on the floor we have plugged the hoses into will be open. Now, first, are you saying that as the doors were open to allow firefighters to use hoses on each floor, this meant that the smoke would inevitably spread through the building?
Yes, because you'd have to open the lobby doors to have that, because we go from a floor below, the hose would therefore come out of that floor, and it would have to go up the stairway into the next floor, and then the only way to get it through those doors is for them to be open. Yes.
And if I could ask you, just for the sake of completeness, to turn to page 28 of your witness statement, and it's the first main paragraph on that page. You said this: in Grenfell, even though I said it wasn't a complicated layout, in the pitch black we still had to look on the floors to find the outlet. It seemed a funny place to be right next to someone's door at the other side of the building from the stairwell, which meant by working to policy and running a hose up one from the floor below, keeping the door open on that floor, running the hose up the stairs onto the fire floor, which meant keeping that door open also. So if that fire was then to breach that room flat on the fire floor and come out into the hall, that smoke would travel through down the hall and out that door and back up the stairwell. And now if you've compromised your stairwell, which someone might say happened in Grenfell, there seemed to be a bit of smoke on the stairwell. Again, is that would you agree that's a summary
exactly,
of your view?
exactly what I was getting at, exactly.
Okay. The next topic I'd like to discuss with you is the evacuation of the mother and child from the 9th floor. Now, as on the basis of your statement, Mr. Tillotson ordered Mr. Bettinson and James Wolfenden to stay in the flat with the mother and child. Is that right?
Yes.
And that they were in flat 65. Is that right?
I don't know the number.
And he and you would then go down to the lobby to get spare sets of BA. Is that right?
No, I initially went down with a guy from Hammersmith who, to this day, I still don't know his name. That's terrible, but...
Would smoke hoods have been useful as well in this instance to have obtained?
Yeah, they would have helped us out a lot in that instance, yes.
Do you carry any with you?
No.
Does any LFB appliance carry smoke hoods?
No.
Follows from that, presumably that you've never had to use smoke hoods to evacuate. And consequent flow from that, you've never had to use them in training or any other simulation. No. Okay. Now, presumably you then returned to the Bridgehead, and did you update the Bridgehead as to what you found and what the plan was?
No. The timings of when we found the mother and the child were realistically at a point where we should have been turning round and coming back out. So it kind of changed everything. And no, to be honest, we came through. I came through the lobby, not the lobby. Sorry, where the Bridgehead was, out onto where the mezzanine was, and just immediately said that I need 2 BA sets now, which, in hindsight, for them to hear that would probably be a little bit strange.
And you're speaking to Mr. Dowden, is that right?
No, to be honest, I don't know actually who that was. I can't remember. I thought it was at the time, but no, I'm not sure actually who that was. It was a watch manager who I was speaking to, but I don't know if it was Mr. Dowden.
Can you, if he spoke back to you, did he have an Irish accent? Can you remember whether it was Mr. O'Keefe, for example?
No, it wasn't him.
Okay. And so you said you wanted a second set of BA. What did the watch manager say to you?
I said we wanted 2 BA sets, not second, set. 2 BA sets, and then the watch manager said what he rightly should say is, where are they? Tell us where they are and we'll send 2 more BA wearers. But because we'd been up and down so many times, and we felt we knew the layout, and the worry for me was that because there was no signage anywhere, we wouldn't find them, and I was just very aware that we'd left 2 people from my watch in the flat with the casualties. So it seemed a much better idea is if we just got them and got on with what we needed to do as quickly as possible. So they were very hesitant, and they kept saying, just tell us where they are, just tell us where they are. And then I believe Commander Tillotson came down, he spoke. I was speaking to a couple of firefighters saying, give me your sets. And I think Commander Tillotson spoke to the watch manager, and then they gave us our sets, which I know was probably very difficult for them to do. But they gave us their sets.
And so did Mr. Tillotson say, when it was suggested that a fresh crew be sent up, did Mr. Tillotson say words to the effect of, that is not going to happen? Does that sound...
Oh, what, with a fresh crew? Yeah. I don't know.
Okay. Would you recognise Watch Manager Watson? Do you know of him, first of all, I suppose, is the first question?
No, I've only been on the Red Watch for a year and a half. I was on the Blues before that, and it's like almost starting a new job, you don't know everybody on that watch at all.
But the upshot is that you obtained 2 BA sets, is that
Yes,
right?
that's
And
correct.
you went back up to floor 9 and to flat 65 in particular.
Yes.
And can you describe for us the conditions on the stairwell as you went back up to the 9th floor?
It was heavily smoke logged. The light in the stairwell was helping us, but it was heavily smoke logged.
You returned to flat 65. You were able to evacuate the mother and child. Is it right that the mother had a BA set and the child was given a spare mask attached to Mr. Bettinson's BA set?
Yeah, we came into the flat, and to be honest, I hadn't actually seen who the lady and her daughter, so I was a bit taken aback because the daughter was so young, and my first thought was, I don't know how we're going to put a set on this girl. And we just had a second, and I just remember saying to Harry that he was going to have to carry her, and we'll stick the mask because he had quite a lot of air left. We'd plug the mask straight into his set, and the lady could put the set on. And it was, I mean, definitely in hindsight, they were very, very calm. It was they might be very calm themselves, but I'd probably put a lot of that down to firefighters Wolfenden and Bettinson, what they were saying to them whilst they were waiting.
And do you have any training for learning how to, put on secondary BA sets on people who may be smaller than firefighters or even children? Is it possible to train for that?
No, we just practice with other firefighters. That's, to be honest, that's who they're for.
And have you had a previous experience where you've had to put, say, a mask on a child's face in order to...
No, absolutely not.
Okay. Now, the next topic I'd like to turn to is return to the Bridgehead. Now, you tallied out at 0217. Did you explain to anyone, did you debrief anyone at the Bridgehead what had happened in relation to flat 65?
No, I didn't have... No.
Did you hear a quick debrief between crew manager Tillotson and the station manager at the Bridgehead?
I think they did have a debrief, but
did you
have
overhear?
Absolutely no idea what was said.
Okay. Do you remember any other discussion at the Bridgehead regarding the use of BA sets to assist the evacuation of residents?
No.
Did you raise it with anyone at the Bridgehead?
No, to be honest, everything was moved so quickly. As soon as we came through, we had to get our breath, and I think it was a bit of a shock from all of us what was happening, because we'd seen that the fire had obviously reached up by the 9th floor because the flames were coming past the window when we were in there. But I think everyone was a bit shell-shocked because we weren't expecting that. And then whilst we were there, it was Paddington's FIU crew came through the door with another casualty, and then sort of the priorities went to that.
Thank you. Now, if I can now turn to your second task you're allocated on the night, and you describe at page 14 of your witness statement, witnessing an incident involving station manager Gareth Cook, and I can take you to it, but maybe easier if we press ahead. You say that Gareth Cook is a doer. He had volunteered to go up to carry out a situation report, which to us, having been up, was nonsense. The situation was every single floor was alight, but obviously for those senior officers at the Bridgehead, which I think it was at group manager level, in fairness to them, they need a bit more information than we were providing to them. Now, to be clear, just taking each element of that, was it you or group manager Cook who said the brief was nonsense?
What, the brief that we were given to go? No one said it out loud. I was just, in hindsight, thinking that it was. I mean, you saw what happened, and it was just. I don't know how to explain it. Nothing was said at the time. It wasn't. It was the correct brief that we were given, but it almost seemed fruitless, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
It wasn't said that anything was nonsense at the time. That was just me.
It's your
in hindsight
reflecting after the event.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And again, this may be a reflection after the event, but what information do you think the senior officers at the Bridgehead needed that they didn't have? What would have assisted them, do you think?
I have absolutely no idea.
So when you say, looking at the final bit of that paragraph, maybe easier if I ask you to turn to it, page 14 of the witness statement, in the first substantive paragraph on that page. And it's really the last sentence. You say, but obviously for those senior officers at the Bridgehead, which I think it was at group manager level, in fairness to them, they needed a bit more information than we were providing them. When you were giving the statement, can you remember what you had in mind, what information they were missing, which they needed?
I think I was just trying to be fair, to be honest. I think, obviously, the information they were getting was very different to be at the Bridgehead than to watch it outside. It was almost like two different jobs, and a lot of high-rise incidents are quite similar to that. The Bridgehead is supposed to be in a safe place, in safe air, and you don't always get a full picture. And I would imagine that what was coming down was a description of what was going on outside, and they probably just wanted to get clarification, but unfortunately what was coming down was the truth.
Did you overhear any information coming from outside the tower to brief the officers in charge of the Bridgehead as to how the fire was spreading on the exterior? Do you remember overhearing?
No, usually once you'd... No, there was still stuff going on. You were just getting on with your tasks. I wasn't paying any attention to that.
Staying at page 14 and looking at the penultimate paragraph on that page, you describe the briefing for the second task you were deployed to take. You say that yourself and Gareth Cook were given a brief, quotes, which was something like, just let me know what you've got up there, tell me what's going on. Because by this time there was no communication anywhere, nothing, and the airwave was flooded due to the number of firefighters. There was one channel really for BA users. Now, I suppose my first question is, what further information did Group Manager Goulbourne need at that stage?
I don't know.
Are you able to be more precise as to the particular task you were required to do?
This time, exactly what was put there. Just go up and try and find out what's going on.
And to the best of your memory, those are the words that Group Manager Goulbourne said to you?
Correct.
Okay. You weren't directed to a particular floor or a particular flat on the floor?
No.
At that stage, were you given any briefing regarding conditions in the stairwell?
No. I think because I'd already been up, I think that was...
Sufficient insight?
I would say. But, no, I wasn't given anything extra, no.
In your witness statement, you describe going up to the 12th floor, and it may help if I ask you to turn to the top paragraph on page 15, and you say this from the second line onwards. We made it to, I think, the 12th floor, and there was no one else on that floor. In the lobby, it was warm. There was a smoke glare which was a little bit low and pitch black. There was clearly no fire in the hallway. We banged on all the doors, but there was no answer, nothing. We stepped back to the stairwell, and I said the situation is we just need to clear every floor, and the only way we can really do that is to put the doors in and make sure there was no one there. We had to check, especially at that time of night. It was the middle of the night. People may still be asleep and not even have woken. People do place earphones in and could be enjoying their sleep, unaware of what was going on around them. Now, in relation to the search you recommended be carried out there, what training have you received to search in this way that you recommended?
All RBA training is usually down to search and rescue and searching a room or searching an apartment.
And the process of breaking in doors to check whether anyone was in there, that's the process you're trained to carry out, is that right?
Normally we wouldn't put a door in unless we had water, especially in a high-rise.
And on this occasion, why did you think it was a necessary step to take?
Because it wasn't... Because I'd already been outside and I'd seen the state of the building, you knew that it was 100% alight. There was no way you could get water onto every single floor because you can't pump that much water up to then supply a hose off every single floor. You just wouldn't get that water up there. So it sort of got to a point where it was just a case of get every single person out as quickly as possible, and so we had to. We didn't have a choice. It was just leave the door and hope that no one's in there, or put the door in and make sure no one's in there.
As you went round each flat, how did you mark that each, on the door, the walls, whatever, that each flat had been searched and was clear?
We didn't have anything.
You say you didn't have radio comms at this stage.
Yes.
How were you recording? What record was being made of the flats and the floors that you were clearing, which could then be relayed back to the Bridgehead when you got back down there, or when you had comms?
If we'd cleared a floor, gone round every single door, and done it, then we'd have relayed that back just by coming back down to the Bridgehead. But if, because there was no signage or anything, it was very difficult to relay any real information to say that a certain floor is cleared. We had no way of recording it, really.
Flowing on from that, if I could ask you to look at the final paragraph on page 15 of your witness statement. We're dealing here with the debrief on your return from the 12th floor, and you say that, quotes, Gareth reported there's pretty much fire on every floor. We haven't got water up there properly. We just need to keep searching to see how many people we can get out, and we couldn't get past the 12th floor at this stage. Can you remember now, did Station Manager Cook mention anything to the Bridgehead officers about having sufficient equipment to put doors in?
No, I don't know.
You can't remember?
No, to be honest, I stayed for a bit of the briefing, and then I had to take a seat, to be honest.
Okay. You didn't add anything to...
No, and it was sort of, you had a station manager speaking to a group manager, and he was the person that was sent to get that information, so I let them get on with it.
One point that's arisen is, can you carry out a search and rescue effectively without having water at this stage in the evening?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you or Mr. Cook say anything about the need for firefighting media to deal with the situations you found on the 12th floor? Can you remember?
I remember saying to Group Manager Goldborn just about make sure we need to get hose onto every single floor, but to be honest, I think that was a bit of a pipe dream.
Now turning to near final topics now, Mr. Gallagher. You're the third time you went under air. And if I could ask you to look at the bottom of page 17 of your statement and the top of page 18, and where you describe the instructions for your third task. And your statement says this: when it was our turn to go up there, was 4 of us. Pat Goulburn gave me the brief, and I think it was probably the most useless but the most honest, correct brief I've ever had. He said, I don't know what the fuck is going on. I need you to go up there and tell me what is going on. And he said, we have fire survival calls coming from the 14th floor and above. We haven't heard from them for ages, and no one can get past the 12th. He said quite simply, I need you to go up there and I need you to go up there and see if you can push higher. It was totally 100% the correct briefing. I remember saying, look, what we'll go to the 12th, if we can go any higher, we will go higher, systematically to the 13th, then the 14th. It was irrelevant telling him that, because we didn't get past the 12th floor. Now, at that stage, were you aware of the flat numbers of any FSG calls that related to 14th floor or above?
No.
Do you know whether Group Manager Goulburn was receiving any information back from crews who'd been trying to get to the 14th floor and above?
I don't know.
You got to the 12th floor, I think I'm right in saying, and you described the conditions you encountered on page 19 of your statement. You then came back down to the Bridgehead. Once you were back at the Bridgehead, did you explain to Group Manager Goulburn that you hadn't been able to put out the fires on the 12th floor?
Yeah, I said that there was pockets of fire. I mean, it was so late in the day. To be honest, when we went into flats, most of them at that level were completely just shells. I mean, they didn't even have external walls. So there were just pockets of fire in there that wasn't really affecting the rest of the building by that stage.
Okay. Just dealing with sort of further matters arising from the night, as you sort of sat reflecting after the event, did you have any further thoughts about the need to carry secondary BA sets when you're responding to FSG calls to assist residents back down the tower?
No, not secondary BA sets, no. You can't, I mean, they're heavy enough as it is to walk up that high carrying a BA set it's just a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work, and you'd be not very effective when you got there, especially if you didn't need it.
Now, flowing on from that question, we can go to it, but at page 24 of your witness statement, in relation to EDBA, you mentioned that the fire service wanted EDBA for everyone, but you say, why put yourself under that strain? It is ridiculous. If I ask you the question, what do you mean by that? It's the answer you've just given. It's an additional burden to carry. And that you do.
Yeah, I just, and it's just my personal opinion, we deal with 99% of fires with SDBA quite effectively, and EDBA is a lot heavier. It's a lot heavier, and there's people can use it, and you use it if you have to. It's not a problem, but there is no need for everybody to have that, because you just won't be as effective. It will have a negative effect in most of our incidents, I feel.
Now, you explained in your statement how you used to do a yearly wear for EDBA, but no longer. And you say it again at page 24, quotes, if you want to be trained wearing EDBA, you have to try and arrange that for yourself, close quotes. Do you know when the change happened? Can you remember?
No, not off the top of my head.
And
no.
can you remember why?
No, one year we were doing them, and the next we weren't.
After the first deployment within the tower, is it fair to say that your view was that the stay put policy was no longer viable at that stage?
Oh yeah, 100%, yeah.
Would you therefore have evacuated the residents, and if so, how would you have gone about it?
What, for the whole block?
How would you have done it? If stay put was no longer viable, what would you have done next, given your experience?
Short of some sort of alarm for the building or some evacuation signal, I don't really see how you could ever short of go into every single floor like we tried to, and every single flat. There is no way you can evacuate a building of that size.
Would you have been able to execute a partial evacuation, do you think, at that stage?
Well, to be honest, that's what we were trying to do when we first went up there. That's where we were going systematically, because obviously the fire travels up. So we were trying to get the next floors, and it was only really when we came out and realised the extent of what had happened is that it should have been the whole building, yes.
Mr. Gallagher, at this stage I've got no further questions. Might I ask for a brief break to see if any further points have arisen?
Yes,
Thank
of course.
you.
Well, Mr. Gallagher, we do find from time to time that additional questions crop up after Mr. Kinnear thinks he's finished. So we'll have a 5-minute break and then ask you to come back and see whether there are more questions.
Thank you.
Please don't talk to anyone about your evidence while you're out of the room. All right?
Thank you very much.
So if you go with the usher now, we'll resume at 10 to 11. Okay. I take it 5 minutes is long enough? Yes. Thanks, sir. Right, 10 to 11 then, please. Yes, Mr. Kinnear. Now, what's the position?
Some brief supplementals with your permission, sir.
Yes, very well. Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. I think a few additional questions.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Gallagher. Thank you for your patience. First of all, location of the dry riser. Where would you expect risers to be in a building of this kind?
To be honest, they can be on where it was. They can be, but it's just not the best place for it to be. And I think I alluded to it in there. It seemed very, from the outside, it seemed a very modern building, and even on the 2 mezzanine levels, when you went in, it all seemed quite modern. But the further you went up, it seemed like a very old block. And I wouldn't expect the dry risers to be on floors outside people's flats.
You'd expect them to be where?
I'd expect it to be in the stairwell. There should be some sort of firefighting lobby, so we can keep the smoke logging down to a minimum.
In a building such as this, where you had fires on multiple floors, are you saying it's impossible or practically difficult to get water to every floor upon which there's a fire?
At a decent pressure, I've never done it, but at a decent pressure, yes, it would be very, very difficult to get that to every single floor.
When you're at the Bridgehead, both before and after your 3 deployments under air, did you hear anyone ask for secondary sets to take up to the tower to help evacuation of residents?
No.
Your 3rd and final deployment, this is I'm afraid it's one of those lawyerly questions. Doing the best you can you remember the time, roughly, or as precisely as you can, at which you were deployed within the tower?
No.
But it was definitely after the deployment, the 2nd deployment, you went up with Mr. Kirk.
Oh, yeah, 100%, yeah.
Can you remember, was it
It was starting to get light.
Okay. Mr. Gallagher, those are all the questions I've got for you. Final thing is say simply thank you for coming along today. It's been very helpful.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to add my thanks to that. You did 3 deployments up the tower, which is perhaps a bit unusual, isn't it?
Yes.
It's very impressive. Thank you very much for coming to tell us about it. Your evidence will be very useful.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much. Right, would you like to go with the usher, and you're free to go now, of
Thank you
course.
very much.
Yes, Mr. Kinnear.
So the next witness is firefighter Theresa Orchard. I'm not aware whether there needs to be a rearrangement of domestic furniture. There doesn't, and so
No,
may I have your permission to call it?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much.
Sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Ms. Orchard. Sit down and make yourself comfortable. Right? Good. Yes, Mr. Kinnear.
First of all, would you be able to confirm your name for the record?
It's Theresa Orchard.
First of all, Ms. Orchard, many thanks for coming along today. It's very much appreciated. In the blue folder in front of you, if you could open it to the first tab, you should find your statement dated the 16th of January. Is that right?
It says Ben Gallagher on it.
Oh, you've still got Mr. Gallagher's, have you?
If you move on,
Try working through the folder, see if
Apologies.
yours is behind it.
don't worry, Miss Orchard, help us on it. Have you got it?
Got yours, yes. And it will also come up on the screen to your right, so you may find that more useful.
Thank you, Miss Orchard. Me and technology don't work, and it appears that I can't even work files either, so apologies. The first statement is the one dated the 16th of January 2018. Hopefully behind the next tab you'll find a contemporaneous note,
Yes.
and behind that hopefully an exhibit to your witness statement, which was a map showing the tower and its immediate surrounding area. Is that right?
Yes.
And have you read those documents recently?
Yes.
And do you confirm that contents are true?
There's one thing in there specifically that I don't recall.
In your statement?
Yes, in the
Okay.
police statement.
Okay. If you could flag for me, well, in a few questions, I'd get some preliminaries sorted first. If you could flag for me what that issue is, then we can take it from there.
Okay.
Now, are you content, subject to that caveat, for those documents to stand as your evidence of the inquiry?
Yes.
Okay. Now, at any stage, if you want a break, please say so. If at any stage my question is unclear, again, just say so and I'll rephrase. Now, you mentioned in your witness statement there was a point that you didn't recall. Would you be able to show us in your witness statement the point you're referring to there?
So it's on page 6. And it's the third paragraph.
The one which starts, I could not see the numbers.
No, by the time I had gone.
Okay, by the time... And what is the error?
So it says that is when I stopped at flat 94. I have no idea where that's. That is obviously nothing to do with.
I was going to ask you a question about that,
Yeah.
so that's helpful, so thank you.
So should I just delete that sentence?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Miss Orchard, thank you very much. Now, the questions I'm going to be asking you today will focus on the FSG in relation to flat 113 on the 14th floor.
Okay.
Now, if I could deal with some basic points first, just to give us some context. First of all, at the time of the fire, is it right you were a firefighter stationed at Soho?
Correct.
And at the time of the fire, you'd been with the LFB for 8 years?
Correct.
And that you drove the pump appliance on the night?
Yes.
And the call sign of that pump appliance is Alpha 242?
Yes.
And although you're based at Soho, for the purpose of the FSG call to flat 113, it's right that you were partnered with firefighter Herrera.
That's correct.
And just so that we can get some context, in terms of timings, the LFB has provided us with records which indicate that you were mobilised at 0130, you were on the road at 0136, and that you were at the scene at 0147. Does that sound about right to you?
Yes.
Now, the LFB has also provided us with timings in relation to your SDBA wear, and they indicate that you tallied out at the Bridgehead at 0247. Is that right? Or thereabouts?
I really have no idea.
Okay. Now, just to provide us with some context of what it was like when you arrived on the night, you arrived at 0147. You tallied out at the Bridgehead to enter the tower under air at 0227. What were you doing in the time between those two events?
So when we arrived, as I was driving, I had to then put on my fire kit and my BA set. And then I made my way to the tower, whereupon I saw the queue of BA wearers. So I just joined that queue.
Good. Now, if I can go to dealing with the first topic, and that's your sort of entry into the tower. And if I could ask you to turn to page 3 of your witness statement. And Miss Orchard, as you've seen with others, it's probably easier to look at the screen, and Paul will magnify the relevant extract of the statement for you. But looking at page 3 of your witness statement, it's the 4th paragraph, 3rd line. You describe there in the 3rd line being called into the holding area.
Yep.
Can you remember, was that holding area inside or outside the tower?
Inside.
Inside. Do you recall an officer writing FSG details on the lobby walls,
No, I don't recall that.
Okay. Did he give you a bit of paper to take up to the Bridgehead? Do you
No.
remember that? No. Could I ask Paul to bring up Met document quadruple 05774? Now, do you remember seeing this writing, this wall chart when you're at the lobby?
No, I don't.
And so it flows from that. If we look at the middle column and the second entry from the bottom, where it says BA 113 14th, it follows that you didn't register that entry there.
No.
And if I could ask you to, Paul, to turn us to the right-hand column, and I think it's the 3rd entry from the bottom, where it says 112 14 8p. Again, I assume you didn't register that entry either.
No, I didn't.
Did anyone seek to draw your attention to the writings on the walls
Not that I
of the
recall,
lobby?
no.
Okay. Before you were deployed from the Bridgehead, did you see any other firefighters coming down from floor 14?
Not that I recall, no.
Did you overhear anything, or was anything passed to you as to what they'd found on the 14th floor?
No.
Again, before you were deployed, were you aware of residents trying to lower themselves out of the window using tied sheets?
No, I wasn't.
Now, the next stage I'd like to ask you about is when you're actually at the Bridgehead. Now, in your witness statement, it's page 4 and the 7th paragraph. You say you think that when you were deployed, the Bridgehead was on the 3rd floor. Is that a fair summary of your memory?
I think that might be, I don't know which is correct, is the correct memory, but I think it was on the 2nd floor, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not absolutely sure either way.
Okay, that's useful. And as you went up from the mezzanine to the Bridgehead, do you recall seeing these wall markings? And if I could ask Paul to bring up Met document 000-13074. Do you remember seeing those at any stage?
No, I don't.
And it follows, therefore, if Paul could magnify the writing on the bottom right-hand quarter, where it says 113, 8 people, 14th floor. You don't recall seeing that?
I don't recall seeing that, no.
Again, did anyone draw your attention to that?
No.
If I could ask Paul to put up another photo at this stage, which is Met 000-15625. Do you remember seeing this at the 3rd floor?
No, I don't.
Do you remember a female officer writing on the wall at any stage?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you. Final question of these types. Paul, could I ask you to put up Met 000-18749? This is a forward information board, I think I'm right in saying. Do you remember seeing that at the Bridgehead, whether on the 2nd or 3rd floors?
No, I don't.
Okay. And you wouldn't have registered the information in the top section of that list?
No.
Okay, thank you. Now, the next topic I'd like to discuss with you is the instructions you were given at the Bridgehead. I think in your statement you described the situation as chaotic, but the female officer who gave your instructions was clear. Is that a fair summary of your evidence?
Absolutely, yes.
And if I could ask you to turn to page 4 of your statement, and it's really the 5th paragraph on that page. You say, I think she said 6 people in flat 113 on level 14. She said they were all right, they're not all right now, we need to get them out. Pete wrote some details on his sleeve. Now, I think my first question is, are you sure that the female officer referred to 6 people?
I'm fairly confident that's what she said, yes.
Okay. Could I ask you to turn to your contemporaneous note? And Paul, the reference is quadruple zero, there we go, 561001. And if you look roughly halfway down that page, it's a paragraph which starts, "At the Bridgehead we were given our brief. My partner and I were asked to go to flat 113 on level 14 and assist a family who were inside down to floor level." You don't mention the number 6 there.
No.
But are you still fairly certain that the number 6 was used by the officer?
Yes.
Did you see Mr. Herrera write the flat details and the number of people within the flat on his cuff?
I don't know what he wrote, but I saw him writing on his cuff, yes.
Okay. Did you write the flat number on your cuff?
No, I didn't.
No. Did you write the number of people within?
No, I didn't.
Do you know crew manager McAlonan and firefighter Juggins?
I don't know them, no.
No.
Well, I may know them by sight, but I don't know them by name.
Okay. Do you remember being behind or in the vicinity of any other crew that was tasked to report to carry out an FSG on the 14th floor?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yes,
please?
of course. When you were waiting to be deployed at the Bridgehead, do you recall any other crew being deployed in relation to an FSG from the 14th floor?
No, I don't.
Now, turning now to your actual deployment to the 14th floor and timings, the LFB records indicate that you tallied out at 0227 and tallied back in at 0247. And so it appears that, would you agree, we're dealing with a 20-minute time period that deals with your trip to the 14th floor?
Sounds about right, yes.
Were you aware at this stage, so just before you deployed, that a group of firefighters, Cornelius, Murphy and Merion, had returned to the Bridgehead from the 14th floor?
No.
And once the female officer had given you your brief, were you given any further update before you were deployed up the tower?
Not that I recall, no.
Now, I'd like to talk to you now about the conditions that you encountered on the stairwell as you went up. Is it fair to say that as you went up from the Bridgehead to the 14th floor, visibility was difficult?
Yes, definitely.
And what colour was the smoke?
It was just dense smoke. I don't recall what colour.
You don't recall it being white changing to black or anything like that as you went up?
No.
Did you leave any equipment on the stairwell at any stage on the way up?
Yes, I did.
And what did you leave?
I left an enforcer
And why did you leave it?
because it was extremely heavy and it was slowing down our progress.
And am I right in saying that because of the difficulties presented by the conditions and the difficulties identifying each floor numbering, that initially you went to the wrong floor?
I don't think we went to the wrong floor. I think we went into lobbies to check the floor numbers, or Pete did, actually, to be more specific.
And looking at page 6 of your statement, your earlier correction, and if we go back to that, it's the second substantive paragraph on that page. You say there in that paragraph, by the time I'd gone backwards and forwards a couple of times, I'd lost where the door was that I'd come in. So you've got then try and find your way back to it. This is when I stopped at flat 94. That was quite a scary moment.
Yeah, the flat 94 bit, I don't know.
You just
I don't recall saying that at all.
Okay. By the time you got to the 14th floor, how were you feeling?
Exhausted.
Is it right you had to stop and catch your breath?
Definitely, yes.
Now, looking now at conditions on the 14th floor, what was the difference between the conditions you encountered on the stairwell and in the lobby on the 14th floor?
I think they're pretty similar, actually.
And when you were in the 14th floor lobby, what was your visibility like? How far forward could you see into the lobby in terms of metres?
Couldn't really see any distance. We were having to sort of crouch down and get right to the door to see the numbers on the door.
And
so
how close up to the doors did you have to go in order
inches.
to... Inches?
Yeah.
Were you able to make out crew manager McAlonan and Juggins when you arrived at the 14th floor lobby?
I couldn't see who they were, but we saw the other team, that team.
What equipment were you wearing on your head?
My helmet and my flasher, and my BA mask, obviously.
And so would you agree that the equipment muffles the voices of those who are speaking?
Yes.
And to what extent does it affect what you're able to hear?
It would kind of like disguise their voice, but you can make out the words, but you have to raise your voice.
Are you able to make out the voices of different individuals? It doesn't...
I didn't recognise the voices.
Okay. And did any of them tell you that they were searching for flat 111?
They didn't tell me that, no.
Did they tell you that? Did anyone say that they'd been into flat 111?
No.
Did they give you any details as to which flats had been searched and who was within any of the flats?
Not to me. So Pete was, the team leader. So they may have given him some information that I didn't hear. But
And how far away was Pete from you?
he would have been just a couple of steps ahead of me.
Now, turning to flat 113 itself, you found the flat, but is it right that the occupants were reluctant to open the door?
Yes.
Could you hear what they were saying?
Yes.
And was it Pete Herrera who was talking to them?
I could hear what they were saying while we were outside the flat. Is that what you mean?
Well, first of all, what were they saying?
So when we arrived at the door, we knocked on the door and said that it was the fire brigade. And they wouldn't answer the door, but they were saying, I think we said, you need to come with us. And they said, we're not coming out. We're not coming out.
Did they say why they didn't want to come out?
I couldn't be clear on that, no.
And is it right that Mr. Herrera eventually got into the
So
flat?
they eventually opened the door, and Pete went in, and a female voice instantly said, shut the door, shut the door. They're quite, obviously, very frightened. So I pulled the door up, just enough that it wouldn't let the smoke in, sort of thing.
And so did you stay on the lobby side or the flat side of the flat
On the lobby
entrance?
side.
The lobby side. And is it right that you could hear Mr. Herrera talking?
I could hear them talking. I couldn't be clear what they were saying.
And you say in your statement that Mr. Herrera was talking to them for about 3 or 4 minutes. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, it may have been even less than that, though.
And is it fair to say then that you couldn't make out any of the conversation?
No.
Could you hear any other voices apart from Mr. Herrera's? You referred to a lady.
I could hear voices, but I couldn't tell whether it was more than one person talking or the same person talking, or it was just voices.
Okay. Did you meet McAlonan and Juggins before or after Mr. Herrera went into flat 113?
Before.
Did you hear, or do you recall hearing Mr. Herrera tell Mr. McAlonan, Ben, there is loads of people in 113, but they won't come out. They won't open the door. They won't come out.
I don't recall that, no.
Do you recall any conversation between Mr. Herrera and Mr. McAlonan?
I only recall a conversation I don't know what it was, when we first met another team on that floor, when we first made entry to that lobby.
And did they give any indication as to how many people were in particular flats?
No.
If I can now talk to you about the contact you had with the occupants of flat 113. Mr. Herrera, you think, was in the flat for 3 to 4 minutes, maybe even less time than that.
Yeah.
Was he on his own in the flat? In the sense, was he the only firefighter in the flat during that
As
period?
far as I was aware, yes.
Is that unusual to go in on your own in that situation?
I would say unusual. But it was an unusual circumstance. So.
Did the fact that you could hear him suggest that he hadn't moved far from the flat entrance door?
I couldn't say.
Given that it was unusual, were you tempted to go in and...
I was about to go in, yeah.
And he came out?
No, he didn't come out.
Sorry, one of the occupants came out?
Yeah.
And did you, as how many occupants came out past you? Can you remember?
As far as I could see, it was 3.
Okay. Who was the how would you describe the first occupant to have left?
I would say the first one was an adult carrying a child.
Okay. Male, female?
I couldn't say for sure, but by the size of the silhouette, I would say it was a male.
And the second individual was who?
Was, I think, another adult,
Okay.
but shorter.
Are you able to say whether a male or a female?
I couldn't say for sure, no.
And the third person to
Was
leave?
the child that
Child.
the
Okay.
first person was carrying.
You didn't see a fourth individual?
No, I did not.
As they left, did you or Pete go after them?
So we both... So they ran out of the flat, basically. I tried to stop them so that they would come with us, sort of thing, but they were gone. So Pete came out, and then we made our way out of the lobby, expecting to catch them up, but we didn't see them again.
Can I ask you, obviously the door of the flat opened
Yes.
as people came out,
Yeah.
and indeed as Mr. Herrera presumably went in.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any chance to see what the atmosphere inside the flat was like?
No, because I was trying to, as the people came by me,
Yeah.
it was very fast, and as the people came past me, I was trying to, talk to them. So I didn't see inside the
You
flat.
couldn't see whether there was smoke or
No, I did not.
whatever?
No.
Did you ask Pete how many people were in? Did you ask Pete how many people were within the flat?
I didn't. No, I didn't.
Did he tell you how many people were in the flat? No. Did you ask whether he'd carried out any sweep or search of the flat?
No, I didn't.
How would you describe Mr. Herrera's demeanour? Was he calm, not calm, what?
Well, I don't know him very well, so I really couldn't say.
But was he in a panic, looking at the extremes? Was he panicking, or was he calm? Or somewhere in between?
Somewhere in between, I think, yeah.
Do you recall Mr. Herrera shouting at Mr. Juggins that Mr. Juggins had not followed his BA partner down the stairs? Did you overhear that?
No, I don't recall that.
Exchange. Did you overhear Mr. Juggins saying anything to Mr. Herrera
No.
before you left the 14th floor?
No, I don't recall.
Did you see or witness any conversation between Mr. Herrera and Mr. Juggins on the 14th floor after the residents had left?
I don't recall, no.
You say at page 8 of your statement, the second substantive paragraph, first line, I wasn't concerned about the air I had. The actual task was pretty straightforward. It was nothing we had not been trained to do. Now, it sounds as if you were in control and not panicking and could have carried out a sweep of the flat if you'd been able to. Is that a fair observation?
I think that question is answered. That statement is an answer to the police question sort of thing, rather than, obviously it wasn't a straightforward task because of the circumstances. I think what I mean is it's a task that we've been trained to do, sort of thing. That actual task wouldn't have been straightforward, and we wouldn't have been relaxed about it in any way.
Did you, after you've seen the 3 residents leave, you say I think they went quickly.
Yes.
Did you think at that stage, should I go in and check and sweep the flat?
No.
No. Are you familiar with the terms of Policy 803 on search and rescue?
Yes.
We can take you to it if you want, but paragraph 7.1c there says that when a casualty is discovered, it's stated that the firefighter should perform a secondary sweep of the immediate vicinity.
Yeah.
Do you think that provision was relevant to the situation you found here on flat 113?
No, I think that is regarding a smoky atmosphere where you can't actually see around the casualty. The idea being if there's more than one person there, they'll usually stick together, and you might pull out one casualty that you find and another one maybe just an arm's length away that you can't see because of the smoke. So in a clear atmosphere, obviously you just look around and see that there's...
And given the smoke conditions you'd encountered in the lobby,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I'm right in saying you said you didn't go inside and couldn't see within the flat.
Yeah.
How could you be sure that smoke conditions weren't deteriorating within the flat?
Because of her saying, shut the door, so it would make me assume that the air was clear in there and they didn't want the smoke to go in.
Okay. If I can now turn to your return to the Bridgehead.
Yes.
Well, before you do, Mr. Kinnear, can I just get this clear? You described seeing 3 people come out of the flat pretty quickly.
Yes.
Did you see anyone else come out of the flat? Other than,
I
of
don't
course,
think
Mr.
so.
Herrera?
No, I don't think so. It's possible because it was very smoky, but I don't think anybody else came out of that flat.
Thank you.
If I can deal with your return to the Bridgehead, did you debrief anyone at the Bridgehead on what you found on the 14th floor?
So Pete gave the debrief, and whilst he was doing that, I wasn't really listening to him because I was more concerned that the floors weren't numbered, and I wanted to tell the waiting BA wearers to be aware of that and to count the floors so they didn't waste time or have to open doors unnecessarily to find the floor that they were going to.
Okay. Paul, could I ask you to turn up Met document 000-15824? Now, does it flow from what you've just said that you didn't have any contact with entry control?
Yes.
Again, do you recall seeing this?
No, I don't.
Okay. If Paul could amplify where it says 1133 rescues. And sometimes the amplification works, sometimes it, as here, it doesn't. But did you not register the information contained on
that area was heavily populated, so it wasn't.
But in your view, when you'd come down, there had been 3 people who'd left that flat?
As far as I could see, yes.
After you'd got down, did you discuss what you'd encountered on flat 113 with any other the crew members or any other firefighters
No, I
you
did
met?
not.
Okay. Did you discuss with Mr. Herrera whether he'd carried out any sweep of the flat or not?
No, I did not. I didn't. When we came down, I'm not clear on what happened, but because I'm not from Pete's station, you know, I don't know where he went, but I went off on my own, so to speak.
So after you quit the Bridgehead, is it right that you had no further contact with Mr. Herrera on the night?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Do you recall, just one point just to test that, did you join up with members of, with Mr. McAlone and Juggins, Herrera, Evans and Bloxham outside the leisure centre? Were you part of that gathering?
Much later on,
Yes.
I was definitely stood with firefighter Bloxham, and and a couple of my fellow crew members from Soho, but I don't recall who was there from Lambeth.
Did you have a conversation with Mr. Herrera?
Possibly, but definitely not about what we'd done.
So he didn't say at any stage in your hearing that a man who'd been in the flat had said to him there were people left behind?
No.
When you were talking with firefighter Bloxham, did she say anything along those lines that Pete Herrera?
No.
On the night, do you recall any conversation with a firefighter in which that conversation with Mr. Herrera had been retold?
No.
Could I ask you, you'll be pleased to know, final section of questions, just a range of issues that rise out of your statement. At page 9 of your witness statement, we don't need to go to this, you discussed the water jet, and you say that you were instructed to help operate the water jet. First of all, can you remember where this jet was set up? And it may assist you if Paul puts up the exhibit to your witness statement, which is Met 000-17360. Miss Orchard, you'll see there's a bigger screen behind you. I don't know whether you're able to stand up and point where the water jet that you were instructed to operate was positioned.
So I think this is the children's playground, isn't it? Here. So the jet was around here somewhere.
Thank you. So near the area marked ramp to the left of the tower.
Yes.
Thank you. Can you describe the effect the operation of the jet had on the spread of fire? Sorry.
I think it was more, the jet was more dealing with falling debris that was landing on a sort of shelf
Okay.
above the first floor, ground floor. And so extinguishing that more than, I mean, we were we were a fair distance from the building, so I think, and there was debris falling into the playground as well.
You discussed in your statement discarded hoses in the stairwell.
Uh-huh.
Can you remember how much and what type of firefighting media was left in the stairwell?
No, it was, no.
And finally, what was your experience of radio communications on the night?
We knew before we went in that there was no radio communication, so I think we didn't use it.
And who told you?
I can't recall.
Miss Orchard, those are all the questions I've got for now. So I don't know whether the usual application for it may be given the time in the morning, a longer break may be necessary.
Well, I was going to suggest 10 minutes. Is that going to be?
Thank you, sir. That'd be great.
We're going to have a break now, Miss Orchard, for just over 10 minutes. During that time, Mr. Kinnear will discover whether he has any further questions he'd like to ask you. So I'd ask you not to talk to anyone about your evidence while you're out of the room, and we'll resume at 20 to 12 and see what more he has for you, if anything.
Thanks.
All right, so we'd like to go to the usher now. Thank you. 20 to 12, then, please. A few more questions, Mr. Kinnear?
3 supplementals, sir.
Very good. Just a few more questions.
Yes, thank you very much for coming back. Just a few supplementals, as the chairman indicated. First of all, at page 8 of your statement, you refer to the fact that at Soho, and this is in the 4th paragraph, we are really busy with AFA, automatic fire alarms. They're often high up in the building, so I'm quite used to that kind of journey. How normal is it in your experience to have AFAs in high-rise buildings?
I don't know how to answer that question, really. It's a regular occurrence.
Okay. Can I now talk to you about flat 113?
Yes.
Now, you were clear in your evidence that when you were briefed by the watch manager that you were told there were 6 people in flat 113.
Mm-hmm.
You were equally clear in your evidence that only 3 people came out. Did that inconsistency occur to you at any stage on the way down to the Bridgehead?
It occurred to me immediately, when Pete came out, and that was it. It occurred to me, but I can't recall whether I just thought it or said anything. I don't think I did.
Apologies. You said when it occurred to you immediately. Did you raise that point with Pete before you left the 14th floor?
I don't think so, no.
Is it possible? You say you don't think so. Is it possible that you raised it?
Yeah, it's possible, but I don't think I did.
Did you raise it with him as you went down?
No.
Did you raise it, first of all, with him once you got to the Bridgehead?
No.
Did you raise it with anyone at the Bridgehead?
No.
Given that you were deployed on an FSG that concerns 6 people,
yes,
and on your evidence you only saw 3 come out,
mm-hmm.
Isn't that the information that ought to have been given to the watch manager in charge of the Bridgehead?
My assumption was, because 3 people came out of a smoke-free flat area environment, that was all that was in there, that they were the only people in there. I was slightly confused, but as I hadn't been in the flat, I couldn't really.
Now, when you got down to the Bridgehead, you said that you were concerned to update them on the difficulties regarding seeing floor numbers.
Yes.
Now, are you clear that there was no further detail you gave at the Bridgehead as to what had happened on floor 14? This is you. Are you sure you gave no further detail on what happened?
I'm pretty confident that's correct.
And you didn't give any information regarding the people, the numbers who'd come out of flat 113?
Not that I recall, no.
Given you'd only seen 3 come out, given you were deployed to bring back 6,
yes,
would you have mentioned the need for a sweep to have taken place, either to Pete Herrera when you got back down to the Bridgehead? Did you raise that with him?
No, I didn't raise that with him.
Okay. Did you raise that with anyone at the Bridgehead, the officer in charge, for example?
No, I did not.
Did you raise it with anyone after you left the tower itself?
No, I did not.
Ms. Orchard, thank you very much for your questions. Those are all the ones I have, so it just leaves me to say thank you very much for your evidence today.
Yes, thank you very much for coming to give your evidence, Ms. Orchard. And you're now free to go, and so please go with the usher.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Mr. Kinnear.
So with your permission, may I call crew manager Raoul Codd?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Codd. Sit down and make yourself comfortable.
First of all, would you be able to confirm your name for the record, please? Thank you very much, Mr. Codd, for coming along to give evidence today. It's much appreciated. In the folder in front of you, there should be a blue folder in front of you. Behind the first tab, there should be your statement dated the 18th of November 2017.
That's correct.
And if you turn over to the next tab, there should be your contemporaneous note.
That's correct.
Have you read those documents recently?
Yes.
And you confirm their contents are true?
Yes.
And are you content for those documents to stand as your evidence of the inquiry?
Yes.
Now, the questioning I will have for you today will focus on your 2 EDBA tasks on the night. If at any time you need a break, shout. If any of my questions are unclear, say so, and I'll try and rectify the matter.
Okay.
Now, if we can deal with some basics first of all, it's right that you are a crew manager in development based at Chelsea.
That is correct.
And at the time of fire, you'd been a firefighter for 8 years, is that right?
That's correct.
And that you were in charge of Chelsea's fire and rescue unit on the night?
That's correct.
And the call sign of that FRU is Golf 346.
Yes.
The other people in your FR unit were Mr. Reddington, Mr. Upton, or Miss Upton, I should
Miss
say,
Upton.
Mr. Syme,
Yes.
and Mr. Oko.
That's correct.
Now, in terms of timings, the LFB's records indicate that you were mobilised at 0133, mobile at 0136, and status 3 at 0147. Does that sound about right to you?
That's about right.
Now, in terms of SDBA wear, or EDBA wear, I should say, EDBA disconnect from your appliance at 0148 and tally out at the Bridgehead at 0303.
Okay.
Does that sound about right to you there? Thank you. Mr. Codd, it would help, I think, if you just kept your voice up. I think you're probably a quietly
Sorry.
spoken man. It's just so that everyone can hear, and most in particular, the transcribers. Now, if I could turn to the first topic, and that's the time which you entered into the building. Now, initially you went to the command unit to hand in your nominal roll board, is that right?
That is correct.
And did you expect your crew to wait for you before going into the building?
My crew, I met them at the base of the tower where the rest of the BA wearers were all in a queue waiting to go into the tower.
When you were at the CU, were you told whether there were any other FRUs at the scene by that stage?
I wasn't aware of any, no.
Did any, when you were at the command unit, or indeed when you went to the tower, did any senior officer suggest that there was a need for EDBA deployment to the higher floors?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Were you given any instructions by any senior officer whilst you were at the command unit?
No.
Did you discuss with anyone there what the priorities were in terms of the firefighting and rescue mission?
No.
Were you aware of the identity of the incident commander when you arrived?
No.
Now, you went to, I think, the holding area near the entrance to the tower next. Is that right?
That's correct.
Now, we can go to them if you need be, but your notes say that you were asked to get hose and breaking in equipment from the appliances. Other members of your crew have said it was a more general deployment. Did you have any view as to whether this was the best use of EDBA crew resources on first arrival?
I don't have a view on that, no. But the equipment was needed, so we just went and got the equipment.
Did you meet the Paddington EDBA crew soon after your arrival at the tower?
No, I saw them coming out of the tower.
Did you have any discussion with them?
No.
Now, as we understand it, Mr. Reddington took a proactive view with the station manager at the tower and said, this is your only FRU crew, we're FRU, and we need to get in there. Did you overhear that conversation?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, and is that a fair summary of what Mr. Reddington said?
Like I said, we saw Paddington's crew coming out, and so, yeah, that is fair.
Do you know who the station manager was at the entrance to the tower to whom Mr. Reddington was talking?
No, I don't, sorry.
Am I right in assuming that the discussion took place at the entrance to the tower, or was it within the lobby inside the tower? Can you
At the
remember?
entrance to the tower.
Okay. Were you given any briefing by the station manager who was at the entrance to the tower with whom Mr. Reddington was talking?
No.
Before, in the lobby stage, did any senior officer seek to prioritise the deployment of EDBA
Not I'm aware of, no.
Now, could I now turn to the BA entry when you entered the tower under Raoul in your deployment? Now, is it right that you lost contact with your crew in the reception area of the tower?
I lost contact with 2 of my crew, yes.
Yeah. And did you go then straight, once you were in the tower, did you go straight to the Bridgehead, or was there, how much time did you spend waiting if you were waiting?
I can't recall.
Now, when you got to the Bridgehead, is it right that it was on the 3rd floor at this stage?
Yes.
And can you describe for us what the smoke conditions were that you found?
Just light smoke in there at the time.
Okay. Did you see any casualties being brought down whilst you were waiting either at the lobby or at the Bridgehead?
No.
Can you give us an idea of what the conditions were like at the Bridgehead? I think you've described them in your statement graphically as a battle scene.
Yeah, there was a lot of people, a lot of information being passed about as well.
I think other witnesses have used the phrase organised chaos. What would you say to that description?
Fair statement.
Could I ask Paul to bring up your contemporaneous notes, Met quadruple 05624, and there you'll see at point 17, you say there was a lot of confusion with LC at ground level in Bridgehead, very bad comms. First of all, what or who is LC? Do you want to refresh your memory there?
I have no idea. It's actually IC, it could be Instant Command, not LC.
If it were IC, does that help you in your recollection in any way, shape or form?
No.
When you say very bad comms, could you expand on that for you, please?
That is referring to our handsets, etc. The radios, there was no communication through the radio, etc. Okay. That's referring to that. Okay. Not referring to communication between people.
Okay. Doing the best you can, clearly you felt it was sufficiently important to record it in your contemporaneous note. There was a lot of confusion at ground level and Bridgehead. Well, given the activities that were conducted at ground level and the Bridgehead, what do you think else? What confusion do you think you had in mind there?
This could be the confusion with SDBA and EDBA. Not sure of what was required at that time.
Okay. Now, you also said in your witness statement, and we can go to it if needs be, that there were, quotes, loads of governors deploying crews on FSG tasks. Can you describe for us how firefighters were being allocated their FSG tasks, or being detailed with their FSG, rather?
When we got to the Bridgehead, we were tasked of an FSG where what floor and what room to search and for search and recovery, and each crew that went up was given a different task to do.
Could I ask Paul to bring up Met 000-15819? Now, do you recall seeing this writing on the wall at the 3rd floor?
No.
Do you recall Watch Manager De Silva writing on the wall at the Bridgehead at the time you were deployed?
Watch Manager Silva was about the same distance that you are from me, so she could well have been writing on the wall.
But did you
I didn't witness it, no.
Did you recall her writing on it? Do you have any memory? No. Okay. Now, can I ask you about your instructions when you were deployed? Is it right that you were partnered with someone called John?
Yes.
Do you remember his surname?
No.
Watch Manager Silva believed that you were referring to firefighter Joseph from Euston. Does that ring a bell at all?
Yes, that's it, Joseph.
Okay. Now, the LFB telemetry records indicate that you tallied, that he tallied out at 0305 and tallied back in at 0320. Does that sound as if he was the man with whom you were partnered?
Yes.
Given the state of the fire when you arrived at 0147 and the height of the tower itself, do you think you could and should have been deployed as an EDBA crew before 0305?
Yes.
Could you have volunteered yourself sooner, do you think?
I don't think so, no.
And why not?
Because, like I said to you, Paddington were already in there. When we turned up, it seemed seconds before we got deployed anyway. So, but the time, when you put time to it, it's totally different.
Now, the instruction you were given was to go to the 22nd floor. Were you given any other detail as to the flat that you had to go to, or flats you had to go to on the 22nd floor?
Yes, we were detailed a flat, but I couldn't tell you the number.
Did you record the flat number? Could it have been 159?
I'm not sure, sorry.
Mr. Joseph said that his task was to get to the 21st floor and search flat 159. Does that have any recollection?
No.
Watchman De Silva stated that in her statement that she briefed you and firefighter Joseph to go to the 23rd floor, flats 204 and 205. Does that ring any bells?
No.
Okay. In terms of any other detail in your instruction, were you told how many occupants would be within the flat to which you were designated?
No.
Were you given any idea of what smoke conditions were like on the stairwell going up?
We were told it is getting smoky, but we knew that anyway.
Okay. Were you given detail of any FSG calls that had been received in relation to that floor?
Not
22?
for that floor, no.
Any other floor?
I knew of FSG calls being taken.
Okay. In a general sense, or?
Yes.
Yes. Were you given any idea, just for the avoidance of doubt, as to whether there were adults or children within the flat that was subject to the FSG?
No.
Were you briefed that there's a possibility that the occupants may have left the relevant flat?
No.
Did you notice when you were at the Bridgehead whether there was any system to record the deployment of EDBA crews in response to FSGs?
It would have been the same as SDBA.
Okay. Now, in terms of your deployment to the 22nd floor itself, dealing first with conditions and the situation on the stairwell, you say in your statement there was smoke from the 6th floor onwards. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And how would you describe that smoke?
Very thick black smoke.
And you lost visibility, and you didn't realise that for some time that Mr. Joseph wasn't with you. Is that right?
I lost him on one of the floors. We saw a firefighter coming down with the casualties, and that's where I do believe that I lost him.
And when you realised you'd lost him, you appear to have carried on alone, regardless. First of all, why did you carry on? Is that right? Is that a fair summary of your evidence?
Yes.
Why did you go on alone?
Because I had a task to do.
And one of the things that's come through the evidence we've heard thus far is the importance of BA crews staying together. Given, first of all, do you agree with that?
In normal circumstances, yes.
And so why did you decide to proceed regardless, given the, sort of the normal importance of BA crews staying together?
Because this wasn't a normal fire.
Would you have been able to bring down casualties on your own, looking at the practical side?
I did.
But given the smoke condition, by the time you got up there and back down, being able to bring them down safely, I suppose, is the question that people have in mind.
In normal circumstances, possibly not.
Now, in terms of radio communications, what was your experience of radio communications as you went up the tower?
I had no radio communication at all.
Did you have no radio comms from the very start, or did it disappear as you went up the tower? Can you help us?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Now, you reach floor 12, and if I can ask you to turn to page 4 of your witness statement, and it's 4 lines from the bottom. You say this: as I've gone up the stairs, I got to the landing. I was just about to turn to the next flight of stairs when these 3 kids appeared. 2 girls who I think were Oriental and a young lad who I think was mixed heritage. The eldest one just cuddled me, I think out of relief. It was really weird. They had no signs of smoke inhalation, and they weren't coughing. Did they say which flat they'd come from or which floor they'd come from?
No.
Did you ask them?
At the time, no.
Okay. Now, if I could ask Paul to bring up Met document 16072_0043. Now, that isn't the reference I was after, but I'll come on to this, Mr. Codd, again. But you took the 3 individuals back down to the Bridgehead, is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. And what debrief did you give at the Bridgehead?
That I didn't make the objective.
And did you, at that stage, did you ask were you able to, on the way down, were you able to get any information as to where the 3 individuals, which flat they'd come from, which floor they'd come from?
No.
No. And am I right in thinking that they'd run on, they weren't able to give you that information?
As far as when I got to the bottom, someone had taken them out before I could ask any more questions.
Now, if I could ask you to turn to the top of page 5 of your witness statement. And apologies, I'm backtracking slightly, going back to where you're on the stairs just after you've met the children. You've just mentioned that children weren't coughing. It was freaky. I didn't take my set off. It was like when you go deep diving and it goes really quiet. That's what the building was like, a sort of silence. I could hear crackling every now and then, and the heat was so intense. I could hear banging on the doors. It was a split second when I thought, do I take the kids down, or should I let them go down on their own and find out what the banging was? I took the kids down. When you say you heard banging on the doors, I know these are difficult questions given the time that's passed. Can you remember on which floor those doors were being banged? Was it the floor on which you were on, somewhere around the 12th floor?
It was quite hard to work out where they were from, but I would surmise it was the floor that I was on.
Okay. Did you, when you were going down the stairwell, did you pass any of these evacuees to firefighter Joseph at any stage, do you think?
No.
No. And you're absolutely certain about that?
Yes.
Okay. On their way down, could any of the evacuees walk freely, i.e. without assistance?
All 3 of them could.
All 3. Now, you get to the Bridgehead. You tallied out at 0317. Is it right that by the time you got down there, the Bridgehead had moved to the ground floor?
That's correct.
Yeah. And you told them, in answer to a previous question, you told them that you hadn't been able to get to floor 22. Is that right?
That is correct.
Were you given any update as to what the position was in relation to the FSG call in relation to the 22nd floor?
No.
No. One notable characteristic of your evidence is you described that it was freaky, to use your words, that when you met the 3 individuals on the 12th floor, they weren't coughing. Did you explain that at the Bridgehead, that you'd encountered them, they didn't seem to be coughing?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Do you think that information was relevant to the ability to get people down from the tower, that you'd encounter 3 individuals who didn't appear to be experiencing respiratory problems?
I don't think so, no.
Okay. And why not?
The reason I used the word freaky was because I didn't expect to see anyone walking down as I was walking up, and especially 3 children on their own.
Paul, could you put up Met document 000-15815? Do you remember seeing these markings on the lobby walls at any time on the night?
No.
No. So none of the information would have registered with you?
No.
Now, in relation to the 3 casualties, the 3 evacuees you'd brought down, did you have any contact with them later on in the night?
No, I didn't see them anymore.
No. Did you know what had happened to them?
No.
No. Were you able to establish that, in fact, the females had come from floor 22?
No.
No. Do you recall speaking with one of them or hearing them speak to another firefighter to tell them that there were a number of people left on the 22nd floor in flat 193?
No.
No. And you're certain you didn't overhear that conversation along those lines?
I didn't see them once I took them down.
Once you were talking about your sort of communications with other firefighters, once you'd come down, did you talk to any other firefighters, whether at the Bridgehead or outside, as to who hadn't been able to complete their FSG missions, about how far they'd got and...
No.
No, okay. Now, if I could ask you to turn to page 9 of your witness statement, and it's 12 lines down. You say this, on the 22nd floor, there was a family of 5 that I never got to. I didn't know until about a week later. The BBC put Grenfell Tower up and put faces to the floors. I spoke with Lou about it. I don't think I could have got up there. The visor on my helmet is all blistered, and I didn't even have it down, so it shows the heat in there. First of all, is the Lou you're referring to their watch manager De Silva?
Yes.
Yeah. And why did you think you couldn't have got up there alone?
Because I brought the 3 children down, and if I hadn't have met them, the heat was getting intense.
And so the reason for you couldn't have got up there was a combination of encountering the casualties and the smoke conditions you encountered on the way up and the heat.
Correct.
Now, when I asked you earlier on, given that you decided to go off on your own, could you, and reflecting on the answer you gave to that question, given you had gone off on your own, do you think it was safe for you to have done so to try and get to the 22nd floor, given the conditions that were later encountered?
At the time, I still am going by yes, it was.
Would it have assisted, do you think, if EDBA teams were deployed in larger numbers, so instead of 2, for example, there were 4? Would that have helped matters?
No.
Why do you think that?
It's easier in 2s than it is in a bigger group.
Could you expand on that, please?
Well, in my second wear, there was a team of 4 of us, and it just gets harder to monitor everyone. And it's standard for 2 people to EDBA.
Did you mention the freaky nature of that you encountered with the 3 individuals not showing any respiratory problems to anyone else at the Bridgehead or to any other firefighters?
No.
Okay. Now, you had a second EDBA task in the evening. And is it right that you were later redeployed with Chelsea crew members Upton and Reddington and another to go to the 12th floor to do a search and rescue?
That is correct.
Yeah. What were the details of the briefing you were given in relation to that second EDBA task?
It was a search and recovery.
Can you help us with the words that were used, or the gist of the words that were used?
Sorry. So basically, go to the 12th floor, search the rooms, and look for casualties and escort them out of the building.
Can you remember who briefed you?
No.
No. Can you remember what rank? A white helmet or above?
It would have been a watch manager or above.
And did you tell the individual who briefed you of your unsuccessful mission to the 22nd floor?
No.
No. Your tally out time for this mission is 05:22 and tally in at 05:47. Does that sound about right to you?
Possibly, yeah.
And could you explain to us how your search on the 12th floor was carried out? Just take us through each step.
So we used the internal staircase again, and I do believe we got to the 12th floor as a team of 4. And as we went into what I would class as a communal hallway to the flats, we then came across a casualty in the doorway. One of the crew, whose name I don't know, is ADSU actuated, and I had to send him down. But before we did send him down, we confirmed that if the casualty that was lying on the floor was conscious breathing or had a pulse, and they didn't have a pulse at the time.
And on returning to the Bridgehead, who did you debrief?
Whoever was there at Bridgehead at the time.
Okay. And can you remember what you said, either the words or the gist of the words?
Similar to what I've just
You
said.
just said.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you mention at this stage your first unsuccessful mission to the 22nd floor as part of your debrief?
I would have already said that when I came down the first time on my first wear, but I didn't mention it again, no.
When you went back on your second EDBA task, would it have helped to have had a thermal imaging camera, do you think?
No.
And why do you say that?
Because it was search and recovery. We'd done a normal BA search pattern, which we're trying to do. It was very dark. Even our torches weren't beneficial.
When would it be useful to have a thermal imaging camera?
A thermal imaging camera is useful, but at that time I didn't think it was to us.
In what circumstances is it useful there?
In any fire circumstance. But at that time we were picking up stuff on the stairways as we went up, like breaking in equipment. And at the time there wasn't a thermal imaging camera to pick up, so we just went up as a team 4.
Thank you. Ms. Scott, those are all questions I've got for you. There may well be some others. So, sir, might I ask you to rise for 5 minutes?
Usual 5 minute.
Usual 5 minutes.
Break.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Codd, we'll break for 5 minutes just so that Mr. Kinnear can check whether there are any further questions he needs to ask you.
Okay, thank you.
Please don't talk to anyone about your evidence while you're out of the room. And we'll be back in at 12:20, please.
Thank you.
Right, I'd like to give the usher. Cheers. Good, 12:20, please. Well, Mr. Kinnear.
Sir, I'm pleased to say there are no supplemental questions, and so in those circumstances, Mr. Codd is free to go.
Right. I wonder whether he should, he's waiting to come in. Would you like just to bring him in for a moment and we'll clarify the position for him? Now, Mr. Codd, I asked that you come in, but all we have to tell you is we don't have any more questions for you.
Thank you.
Well, that may be a relief, I don't know. But thank you very much for coming to give your evidence. It's a great help.
Thank you.
And you are now free to go. So you can go to the usher.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Mr. Clare.
So the fourth witness this morning I'd like to call is firefighter Katie Foster.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Foster. Sit down and make yourself comfortable. Yes, Mr. Clare.
Would you please confirm your name for the record?
Yes, it's Katie Foster.
Good morning, Ms. Foster. First of all, thank you very much for coming along today. It's very much appreciated. Now, the focus of my questions this morning are going to be on your FSG mission to the 18th floor. That's the principal matter I'm going to ask you to deal with.
Yeah.
Now, that's done. Can we turn to the procedural matters? And in front of you is a blue folder. And if you could open that up, hopefully behind the first tab is your statement dated the 28th of December of last year. Is that right?
Yep.
And if you turn over to the next tab, hopefully you'll find your contemporaneous notes. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
And if you turn over to the final tab, hopefully you'll find the exhibit to your police statement, which is a floor plan of the 18th floor of the tower. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And have you read those documents recently?
Yes.
And you confirm their contents are true?
I do. There's a slight mistake on my behalf about my training, that I've just got the venues wrong for the duration that I was there for. So I was at Park Royal for 3 weeks and Harrow for 2 rather than the other way around. But
Thank
Right,
you.
would you like us to get that right now?
if you could, please, yes.
Yes, of course, then we'll do that.
I think it's on the first page of your witness statement on the third paragraph.
Yes.
And do we swap Park Royal for Harrow and vice versa?
Yes, so Park Royal was the second venue, but it was 3 weeks and Harrow was the final 2 weeks.
Good. Thank you very much.
Subject to that amendment, are you content for the statement, contemporaneous note and exhibit to stand as your evidence in inquiry?
Yeah.
Now, if any of my questions are unclear, please say so, and I'll try and get it right and rephrase them so they're clear. Secondly, if at any time you need a break, please say so, it's not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Now, first thing I'd like to do is just cover some basic information with you, if that's all right. First of all, at the time of the fire, you were a firefighter based at Willesden, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And that you were a probationer who'd started in May 2017,
Yeah, that's correct.
so roughly 6 weeks before the fire.
Yeah, I passed out roughly 6 weeks before, I believe.
And the appliance you were in on the night, the call sign was Golf 281, is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
And that your BA partner on the night was firefighter Greg Lawson,
Yep, that's correct.
and also part of the crew were crew manager Cardy,
Watch manager Hardy.
sorry, watch manager Cardy, firefighter Tom Welsh, and is it crew manager Eden?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Now, as to timings, LFB records indicate that you were mobilised at 01:26, mobile at 01:28, and at the scene at 01:40. Does that sound about right to you?
It does, yeah.
Now, in terms of timings of SDBA wear, again, the LFB records indicate the SDBA was disconnected from your appliance at 0143, switched on at 0142, and you tallied out at the Bridgehead at 0153. Again, does that sound about right?
It does, yes.
Thank you. Now, it appears that you switched on the BA set at 142 and tallied out at the Bridgehead at 153. Does that switching on 11 minutes before you tallied out, does it have any consequences for the amount of air you have?
No, it's simply just to turn the cylinder on, so you're ready, basically, once you've received your brief, to go straight under air. So I was just, I think because I'd come straight out of training, it was something that we were quite used to doing, so...
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the first topic I'd like to discuss with you today is your entry into under air and your deployment generally. And we don't need to go to it, but at page 5 of your witness statement, you describe on arrival that you made your way to the Bridgehead. Was this you, Mr. Lawson, Mr. Welsh and Mr. Eden?
Yes, I think just the four of us, I think I remember, yeah.
Mr. Welsh and Mr. Eden appear to have been deployed at 0159, whereas you tallied out at 0153. Do you know why there was a 6-minute difference? Can you remember now?
I think there was quite a large queue waiting to go in, so I think me and firefighter Lawson were before them, and there may have been another crew behind us for the reason for the delay, I think.
How would you describe the degree of organisation at the Bridgehead?
It was quite, from what I remember, quite hectic. Obviously, not having much experience since training, there was just people everywhere. But yeah, I guess it's obviously not the same as training, so...
Now, if I could ask you about your instructions, can you remember who it was who gave you your instructions?
I don't recall, no.
Was it a man or a woman?
It was a man.
Did he have an Irish accent?
I don't recall.
Was he wearing a white helmet?
He was, yes.
Okay. Now, if I could ask you to turn to page 5 of your witness statement, and it'll come up on the screen, which may be easier for you, Miss Foster.
Yep.
And at page 5, the first substantive paragraph on that page, lines 1 to 3, you say this: I was paired with firefighter Greg Lawson, and after going through into entry control, we were given our brief by an officer wearing a white helmet. I did not get his name or rank. Our brief was that there is fire survival guidance call on the 18th floor, and we were to go up and see who was there. The fire survival guidance call related to a resident on the 18th floor who is currently on the phone taking advice from a controller, whose name I do not know, about what course of action to take. I don't know what advice was given. At the time that I remember thinking to myself that it was a long way to go with the standard duration breathing apparatus, as opposed to on a fire rescue unit where you have extended duration breathing apparatus, where 2 cylinders which provide more air. Did you know, were you told that the occupant was currently on the phone, or was that your assumption?
I don't remember, actually, whether it was just what I'd assumed or not.
Okay. And are you able to help us with any more detail that you were provided when you were given your instructions at the Bridgehead?
I remember, just as what I've said in my statement, it was quite brief. No sort of flat numbers or how many people. It was just go to the 18th floor and see who's there, basically.
And were you given a plan or a layout of each floor on the tower?
Not that I can remember, no.
And assume from what you've said, you weren't given any details about any occupants who had vulnerabilities or disabilities, anything of that nature?
No.
Okay. And when you use the phrase FSG, did you understand that you were to try and search and rescue? Was that your understanding of your mission?
We weren't given those specific instructions, so that wasn't my complete understanding. I think from my perspective was that me and Greg were to go up and make a sort of risk assessment from there and see what we would do with what we found.
Given his relative seniority, I think Mr. Lawson was in the brigade for 20 years or so, would you have left it to Greg to assess whether a rescue was viable or not once you got there?
I definitely, I think, followed Greg, but obviously on my lack of experience, but I think we both sort of made decisions together. It wasn't just, I'm going to follow what Greg says. I think we're both very happy with our decisions. So.
And did you expect more detail in the briefing?
I think I would have done, yes.
Yeah. And did you ask any further questions? You were given your instruction. Did you ask any sort of supplemental questions to get more detail or
No,
not?
not that I remember.
Okay. Did Greg?
I don't remember.
Okay. Now, in the last 3 lines of the paragraph I just quoted, for the record, you refer that you say that you remember thinking to yourself it was a long way to go with SDBA. Are you all right?
Yeah.
Refresh your memory.
Yeah.
Did you raise your concern or that observation with Greg before you were deployed?
Not that I recall at that time, no.
Do you remember him saying anything either to you or to the officer giving you the instructions at the Bridgehead?
No.
Would the fact that you'd already had your BA set on for 10, 11 minutes, would that have affected your ability to get up to the 18th floor?
No. So when you turn the cylinder on, you operate a first breath button, which will only then allow you to breathe once you actually put the mask on, so it won't actually affect what's inside the cylinder.
Now, that answer flows to another question. You were deployed up the stairwell, and I think you decided not to put your masks on at the beginning of your ascent.
Yeah.
One of the issues people are interested in is whether that affected the fact you didn't have your masks on. Did that affect the fact that your cylinders were on? Did it have any sort of deleterious effect? Did it use up or conserve air?
Oh no, our aim was to go up as far as we could in clean air before we actually started breathing through our sets, just because we knew we had a long way to go, so we didn't want to use air that we potentially might not have needed to before we entered the smoky atmosphere.
And is it right that the ascent to the 18th floor took you about 5 to 10 minutes?
I think so. It could have been less, it could have been more, it's just, yeah.
And can you remember radio comms? Do you remember trying radio comms on the ascent up to the 18th floor?
I don't recall on the way up, no.
Do you remember hearing radio traffic as you went up?
No.
You got up to the 18th floor. What were the conditions like on the 18th floor lobby? Can you remember?
You couldn't see your hand in front of your face, so thick black smoke. In terms of temperature, I can't really remember how hot it was.
And as you get into the 18th floor lobby, you describe in your statement of the visibility so poor that you had to get down on your knees. Is that right, to try and make out where the flats were? Is that a fair summary?
I think I remember the door numbers being quite low down, so yeah, it was impossible to see them from standing, but it was also quite difficult even getting that close.
Now, at this point, Paul, could I ask you to bring up the exhibit to Miss Foster's statement, which is MET 000-15807. And I think this is a hand-drawn plan you made of the 18th floor, and you provide it as an exhibit to your witness statement. And I think in your statement you describe, starting at the bottom left-hand corner of that plan, going around the flats 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 in that order.
Yeah.
Now you go to flat 1, which for the record is flat 151. What did you find there?
The door was locked and there was no answer. Okay. So
and were you shouting as you went round each?
We were, yeah. We bang quite loud as well on the doors.
And what were you shouting?
Fire brigade come to the door, basically.
Now, the next flat you went to is flat 2, which is flat 152. Am I right in saying that the occupant, a woman, answered the door and opened it?
She did, yes.
Yeah. And who was closest to the flat entrance door? Was it you or Greg?
I believe it was Greg.
And did she speak to Greg or to you or to both of you?
I can't remember.
Did you go into the flat?
Yeah, we both entered the flat.
And can you describe for us the conditions within the flat?
Clean air. There were no signs of fire affecting the flat. So it was completely different to the lobby area.
And how many people did you see in the flat?
4.
And where were they and first of all, can you describe for us adults, children?
1 adult, 1 female adult, and 3 children.
And could you see any internal doors within the flat?
I don't remember seeing any doors, which could be wrong, but that was my recollection.
And after you entered into flat 152, flat 2, did you close the flat entrance door?
We did, yes.
And can you remember now how effective that was at preventing smoke from the lobby penetrating into the flat?
I would say very effective.
Did you talk, once you got into the flat, did you talk to any of the occupants?
We did.
You? Did you?
Both of us did.
Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, who did you talk to, first of all?
The adult.
And what did you say?
I don't remember saying an awful lot. I think I remember the lady saying that, asking us if they were going to die. So it was just trying to reassure her for her children's sake. That was all I really remember saying.
And did Greg talk to her?
He did, yes.
And can you remember what he said to her?
The only that I really remember is about advice before we went to leave the flat, which would have been to put blankets along the door. And that was about it, really, I think.
Okay, and that was the entirety of the conversation he had with her whilst in the flat, was it?
It was probably more because we went in and we were actually able to, we took our masks off just because, again, we wanted to save as much air we could, so.
Okay. You say in your witness statement at page 7, the top paragraph, the penultimate final lines. Probably useful if that's brought up for you. The decision you mentioned there, the advice given by Greg to put towels on the front door to stop smoke coming in. And then you and Greg left the flat, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
As you left, did Greg say anything to the woman occupier of the flat?
Other than what I've put in my statement, I can't remember.
Did you say anything before you left to her?
I don't remember.
Okay. You then left the flat. You say that the decision did make sense to me as the stairwell was full of smoke and the visibility was bad. Therefore, it would have been impossible for us to get the family down the stairs without going unconscious. We also need to see who else was on the 18th floor. Was that a thought you had at the time, or is it a later thought you've had once you've been reflecting upon the events?
At the time.
Okay. And did either you or Greg clarify with the woman what the flat number was?
I don't remember, no.
Can you remember asking?
I don't remember asking myself, no.
Okay. And you don't recall Greg asking?
No.
Okay. Did you or Greg tell the woman who's decided what you were going to do next after you'd left her?
I don't know if we said that we needed to check the other flats, but other than that, I don't think so.
Okay. Did you say anything along the lines that the two of you would be back to take her down?
No.
And what did you expect would happen to her whilst you were searching the other flats?
I think we could only really go on what information we had at the time, because we entered the building when only one side of the tower was alight, and the fact that we'd come out of a smoke-filled lobby that you wouldn't have been able to breathe in. Her flat seemed to be the safest place to leave them for the time being.
Did Firefighter Lawson say that you would both come back and check on her after you checked the other flats?
I don't recall.
Okay. You did go back though to check on her before you left floor 18, didn't you?
I don't recall that either.
Okay. You left flat 2 and then you went to flat 3, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And what did you find there?
Greg was in front of me, but a gentleman opened the door where he poked his head round. We asked how many people would be in the flat, to which he replied there was 5. It was a very quick conversation from what I remember, and it was the same guidance sort of from the previous flat, just to keep blankets by the doors if possible.
And it's always difficult estimating time. I think in the statement it's been referred to 20 seconds or so. Do you think it was shorter, longer? How long do you think the conversation took place?
I think it was probably roughly about right, just because I think smoke could have started pouring into the flat by if it was too long of a conversation. So.
And it was Greg who was talking to the male occupant of flat 3, was it?
Yes, that's correct.
Where were you standing in relation to Greg?
I think just behind his sort of left-hand side.
And what were the smoke conditions like in the lobby at that stage?
The same as before, so thick black smoke and very, very poor visibility.
Could you see the gentleman who opened the door?
Yes, just because there was light coming from the door, and I could see him sort of where he'd poked his head around the corner.
How far did he open the door? Was it inched open, or was it broader than that?
I would probably say about that far, so not from my recollection, so not very far.
Do you think he would have been able to see you from where he was standing?
Probably not.
Probably. And it's right that you never went into flat 3?
No, we didn't.
Okay. And could you see what conditions were like in the flat? Other than seeing the backlight?
Personally, no, I couldn't.
Okay. Did Greg ask how many adults and how many children were within that 5?
I don't recall that question, no.
Would that type of information assisted later search and rescue efforts if you were unable to take the family of 5 down?
I'm not really sure on that one, actually.
And why are you uncertain?
I don't know. I think just knowing that there were 5 people would be enough information for them, but it could have helped knowing that there were children there. So.
And do you remember whether Greg clarified the precise flat number with the gentleman?
No, I don't.
Now, I think you're right in saying the next flat you looked at was flat 4, which had an open door. Was it physically open, or was it just simply unlocked? Can you remember? Closed but unlocked? Can you remember?
I think it was open.
And when you looked in, I think it's fair to describe your evidence. It was pitch black, full of smoke.
Yes.
And you carried out a sweep.
Me and Greg searched the flat. Yeah.
And how did you search it? Can you explain to us the method you used in searching flat 4?
It's not
Did you
really
go in?
supposed to happen, but we both went in and we both decided it would be quicker to search if we split up. So I think I went on the left hand and Greg went on the right hand wall, and then we would meet and then decide whether we thought it was empty.
And you both confirmed there was no one in there?
Yes.
And you went to the next flat, which is flat 5. Again, the door was open, is that right?
Yes.
Was it physically open, or was it simply closed and unlocked?
I think physically open, just because of the amount of smoke that was in the flat.
And again, the conditions were similar to those you'd encountered in flat 4, is that
Yes.
right? Okay. Finally, you came to flat 6. The door was closed, is that right?
It is, yeah.
And in your statement, you state that you experienced an increased heat
Yes.
standing by the door. Was it apparent from that experience that there was a full-blown fire engaged in flat 6 or not?
That's what I expected, yeah.
I forgot to ask earlier, did you have a thermal imaging camera with you?
We didn't know.
Now, once you'd finished searching the flats, 4 and 5, where there were open doors, did you close the doors behind you?
I don't remember.
Okay. Did you, at that stage, once you'd completed the circuit of all 6 flats, did you discuss whether it was practicable to evacuate the residents in flat 2 and 3?
I recall that we came back to the stairwell and then began to try and radio down to the Bridgehead, to which we were unsuccessful. on numerous occasions.
I think in your statement you say 7 times.
It was quite a few times, yeah. And I think we both knew that it was not practical to take 9 people down, even one person, just because of the conditions and the knowledge that we had, that we weren't aware that the whole building was alight while we were in there. So we had to go on the information we had.
And when you were trying to radio down, is it right that you used both channels 1 and 6?
Yes.
One question, a query that's arisen is, would it have been possible to have gone back to flats 2 or 3 and asked to use their mobile phones? Would you have been able to, even if you'd had access to those phones, would you have been able to contact the Bridgehead or anyone at the Bridgehead using those phones?
Not at the Bridgehead, because we wouldn't have contact details for those people.
Now, once you'd carried out the search of the 6 flats on the 18th floor, is it right that your BA bar was getting lower?
It was, yeah.
And was the limited amount of air that you had left, was that a factor in your decision to return to the Bridgehead?
Yes, it was.
Was there a discussion about leading the occupants of flats 2 and 3 down in a snake line with,
No.
Mr. Lawson? Are you sure about that?
Not that I don't recall that.
Did you discuss whether there were any other firefighters coming up the stair who could help take down the occupants of flats 2 and 3 on that floor?
I don't recall having a conversation about that, no.
We covered this earlier, but just to put the point squarely, did you go back and tell the families in flats 2 and 3 what you were planning on doing or what they should expect?
I personally don't remember going back to the flats at all, no.
The conditions on the way down, I think you describe visibility as bad, and that you were sweeping the floor and leaning on your back foot to avoid falling. Is that a fair summary of...
It is, yeah.
And you say that you heard children screaming at about the 12th floor, and you turned back to see whether you could find them.
Yeah.
And could you find anyone?
No, we weren't able to. I think we went up another floor, and by that point the screaming had stopped. And again, our cylinders were getting quite low, so we made the decision to turn around.
And when you went back to following the voices, as it were, did you go from the stairwell into the lobby around the 12th floor? Did you go that far to see whether you could hear where the sounds were coming from?
I didn't personally. I'm not sure whether Greg did, because he was in front of me when we turned back round.
Okay. Describe in your witness statement that the back of your neck felt like it was burning. Did that burning sensation start around the 5th floor, as you indicate in your statement, or did it start higher up? Can you remember now?
I think it was about the 5th floor. It could have been higher, but sense of my surroundings weren't great. So.
And on your way down, is it right that you saw a woman in a burqa headscarf with a cloth over her face being carried out?
Yes.
And can you remember where you saw her? I'm mindful of the answer you've just given, but...
I think it would be about, I think it was the 4th or 5th, maybe just around there, because I know there was a bit of a queue to come out of the building. There was quite a lot of firefighters trying to get out, so...
Now, you got back to the Bridgehead. Was the Bridgehead on the 3rd floor at this stage? Can you remember?
From what I remember...
Yeah. And the LFB docs indicate that you tallied back in at 0228. I think that sounds about right from what you said earlier on. Can you describe the conditions, the situation at the Bridgehead when you got back down there?
As in visibility or smoke, or just...
No, fair point. You describe it in your statement as being like mayhem.
It was, yeah. There was just people everywhere, and I think by that point there were more BA boards, and I wasn't really sure where my tally was, so trying to find that was a bit hectic.
Who debriefed the officer at the Bridgehead? Was it you or Greg, or did you both do it?
As we came down, we were met by an officer in a white helmet. I don't know their name. And as we were beginning to debrief, he said for me to just go and get my tally and close down, and Greg stayed there to draw a map on the wall.
Okay. Before you were sent off to do other things, can you remember what Greg said to the officer about what he'd encountered on the 18th floor?
I think we said that we'd come from the 18th floor, but then by that point he'd asked me to go and close down.
Did you see firefighter Lawson draw on wall information relating to the flats on the 18th floor?
No, not personally.
Did you know that's what he'd done later on?
Yes.
Yeah. And did he tell you?
Yes, he did.
Okay. And did he tell you what he'd written, the information that he'd written?
I think just a rough floor plan and how many people we'd found in each flat.
Did you see what he'd written on the wall?
No.
Okay. If I can now talk about some various matters that are relating to after you'd come down out of the tower. After you'd left the Bridgehead, did you know what steps were being taken to go up back to the 18th floor to deploy fresh crews? Were you aware of what steps were taken?
As in, did anybody go back?
Yeah. Or were
I
you
wasn't aware, no.
Okay. Did you go back to the Bridgehead when it was on the ground floor later in the evening?
I didn't return back into the tower after I left from that particular wear.
In your contemporaneous notes, you referred to an EDBA crew which you passed before deploying to the 18th floor. Do you think larger crews, i.e. a crew of 4 of EDBA wearers, would have assisted rescue efforts, particularly in relation to the 18th floor?
It could have done, but then again, I think it would have been on those particular firefighters' decision as to what they would do as well, whether they thought it'd be safe enough to take them out of their flats. So.
I hope you don't mind, given you a probation or were at the time of probation, if I just ask a brief question about training.
Mm-hmm.
And in page 5 of your witness statement, you explain that you only had limited training on FSG, as the training course is not as long as it used to be. Do you know how long the course used to be?
17 weeks, I believe.
And how long what training how long in terms of days did you get on, or hours did you get on FSG as part of your course?
Probably not very long, I think, from my memory. I think it was just a sort of, not a quick conversation, but it's because it's mostly dealt by with from control. It's not something that we had a lot of training in.
Okay. At page 6 of your witness statement, you say that you and firefighter Lawson didn't have any breaking in gear. Now, I'm mindful you're a probation of 6 weeks standing at the time, but did your training indicate that you would normally carry in breaking in gear on briefs such as this?
I know it's for when you set up a bridgehead, you take certain items of equipment, and breaking in gear is one of those. I guess, yeah, it would have helped in our task.
And how would it have helped?
To gain entry to the flats that we came across that were locked.
Okay. And do you know why you didn't have breaking in gear with you?
I think myself and my colleagues from Willesden took certain amounts of equipment to the bridgehead, and I think we then took bits of that, and we didn't have any of the breaking in gear with us particularly.
Ms Foster, I'm really grateful for your help. So may we have a standard 5-minute break, slightly intrude into the lunch hour, and then maybe adjourn slightly later for lunchtime.
I'm sure Ms Foster would like to finish her evidence before lunch if she can. So we'll break for 5 minutes. Give Mr. Kinnear a chance to decide whether there are further questions he needs to ask, and then we'll come back at 1 o'clock and take whatever else needs to be done. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine, thank you.
Right. Please don't talk to anyone about your evidence when you're out of the room.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I'd like to go with the usher then, please. Right, we'll resume at 1 o'clock.
Thanks, sir. Just a few supplementals, sir.
Yes, Mr. Keane. I think there are a few more questions, Miss Foster.
Yeah, okay.
Ms Foster, thank you very much for your patience. First of all, can I ask questions in relation to flat 2?
Yes.
Now, you were aware, as I understand it, that there were children within the flat, is that right?
Yeah.
Did you discuss with Greg whether, because there were children within the flat, their evacuation ought to have been prioritised?
I don't recall having that conversation, no.
Okay. Did Mr Lawson raise it?
I don't remember, no.
At that stage, would it have been practicable to have evacuated the 2 children as a matter of priority?
From the conditions in the stairwell, I wouldn't have deemed it as safe to take anybody out, so no.
At that stage, can you remember how much air you had left in terms of maybe the easiest percentage of the cylinder contents?
I don't remember, I just remember that Greg had less than me, but I can't remember how much, no.
When you left the occupants and their children within that flat, what was your plan? What were you going to do in relation to them? What were your intentions?
We wanted to search the rest of the floor, just to be aware of how many people were there. We didn't make a specific plan for that flat.
Did you think or assume that someone, a separate crew, would come back and rescue them?
That was my thinking, yes.
Given the conditions you encountered on the stairwell going up, given the conditions you encountered on the 18th floor lobby itself, and given where they were located, i.e. on the 18th floor, if they were to be rescued later, would they still not have encountered smoke and difficulties, if not greater difficulties?
I think there were times in the stairwell where the smoke seemed to clear, so that would have been a more appropriate time, not that anybody would know when that was to happen.
Flowing from that, whilst you're on the 18th floor lobby, did the smoke conditions deteriorate, improve, or remain constant?
Remain constant.
Given the conditions you experienced on the 18th floor, were you concerned about fire spread, rapid fire spread, or smoke spread to flats 2 and 3?
Not at the time. I think leaving the building and turning around to look up at it and realising that the whole building was alight, I was quite concerned after that.
Sorry, I didn't catch the last bit, sorry. There's competing external noise.
That's
I'm sorry
okay.
about that.
When I turned around to look back up at the building, I obviously wasn't aware at the time when I was in there what was going on. So when I turned around and saw that it was all alight, that then became a bit of a worry for me.
What made you believe that you'd have enough time to get down, report and debrief to the Bridgehead, and then for another team to get up to the 18th floor before smoke or fire overwhelmed flat 152, so flat 2? What made you think there was enough time for all that to be avoided and get people out?
Like I said, we were going on what we knew, and we weren't aware of any changing conditions ourselves because of lack of radio communications and not physically being able to see ourselves. So we weren't actually aware what actually happened outside.
Okay. Is it fair to summarise your evidence this way, that you assumed that the lady and her children would be safer within the flat than trying to get them out?
Yes, that's correct.
And for the reasons you gave earlier?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, can I ask you final set of questions, and that's in relation to flat 3. Did you get a sense when you were overhearing the conversation between the man and Greg that English was his first language?
Yes.
And he set out he could explain himself clearly and understandably?
From what I could hear, yes.
Did you get the impression that he wanted to talk to you and Greg to explain what his situation was?
I'm not really sure.
Do you remember him asking for your help?
I don't remember that, no.
Okay. Do you remember him saying that he had 2 children with him in the flat?
I don't remember that, no.
Do you remember him saying he wanted to get out?
I don't remember that myself, no.
Do you remember Greg saying that there was fire on the fire was on the other side of the building and he wasn't to worry?
I don't recall that, no.
Okay. Do you remember him asking Greg the question, how long will it take you to get me out?
No, I don't recall that, sorry.
Okay. Is it that you don't recall it or it didn't happen? Can you be more certain?
I can't say whether it did or didn't happen, so I don't know, it's a tough one because I was behind Greg and not actually having that conversation myself. That wouldn't be something I'd be able to answer. But I didn't hear it, so...
And can you remember, apologies, this is a sort of maybe a lawyer type question. Can you remember how long the exchange lasted between Greg and the gentleman who lived within flat 3?
I think, like I said in my statement, it was quite brief, so maybe 20 to 30 seconds, but that's just my memory, so...
Ms Foster, thank you very much for the evidence you've given today. Your help has been much appreciated. Those are all the questions I have for you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for coming to give your evidence. It's very helpful, and I hope it hasn't been too difficult. Thank you very much. You're free to go if you'd like to go to the usher. Thank you. Well, that's a convenient point, Mr. Kinnear.
It is my invite you to return at 2:10, and then we can commence with firefighter Gregory Lawson.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks, sir.
2:10 then, please. Thank you.